Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
It's Ron Crabtree here, and I'm back with this episode of MetaPod, and we have a very interesting speaker or a very interesting guest that's going to join us here, Alan Shevela, who I've known for a number of years. He's the Vice President of Global Supply Chain for a $700 million Tier-1 supplier to the auto industry, which, if you're not familiar with the auto industry, is about as competitive and gritty as it gets in terms of, supply chain. And I was going to share some interesting perspectives that I believe anybody in any industry could benefit from in terms of, these three common challenges that we face. It's the forever labor shortage. It's here to stay. It's not going away. We've got this unrelenting challenge around digital transformation, the digitization of work, getting on the gravy train, I should say, for, adopting technologies or being left in the dust. They just generally, we have to do more with less of everything. Transportation, logistics, material, inventory, facilities, you name it. So with that, we'll get into this. So Alan will share kind of three diagnostics that his mind would be these kind of three common areas relating to these challenges you should be looking at. Talk about, how do you look at that? Why do you look at it? What's the evidence? What are the questions we should ask if we're not, an expert? And then it will follow later with, okay, so what do we do? And what are the actions we could take? So with that, Alan, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. Well, Ron, as you mentioned, you and I have known each other for years. I always enjoy having these conversations with you. For our listeners, my name is Alan Shevela. I'm the Aludyne Vice President of Global Procurement and Supply Chain. I joined Aludyne in 2020, a very crazy time to make any type of a job transition. But one of the things that attracted me to Aludyne was the overall growth strategies and the commitment from the leadership team to not stay stagnant, but to really always challenge ourselves and grow. I started my career with General Motors in 1996 as a supplier quality engineer, and then I've had a couple of stops along the way before I arrived at Aludyne. At a high level, Aludyne is a metalworking company at our core. We are a casting and machining supplier and to all of the global OEMs, whether that's General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen. I don't like to say all of the OEMs because there's so many new ones coming down with electrification, but we supply the majority of the OEMs with a lot of aluminum, magnesium, and ferrous cast and machine components for different steering knuckles, cross-car beams, subframes, products of that nature.
So I would imagine that the upshot or the outlook for Aludyne is going to be fairly positive because all EVs require drivetrains and steering and all those things, and they need to be lighter and stronger than they ever were before because you've got this battery going to tow it around, right?
Absolutely. There are a lot of Tier-1 automotive companies that fear electrification for a reason. If you are strictly powertrain and you're being potentially replaced by battery, then you have some concerns on how you revision your business. For us at Aludyne, all of the products we make stay consistent. You still need to steer the vehicle, which you still need steering knuckles. You still need cross-car beams for all of your console features. You still need subframes to hold the car together. So our overall strategy doesn't change much other than the fact that we're always looking to grow with new and growing customers. So we still want to keep our current customer base, but we're always interested in growing with all of the new EV companies that are coming on board.
Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, ultra competitive industry and always has been. So let's jump to, kind of the meat and potatoes here. And I'm really interested in your perspectives when we think about those three common challenges we all face. Certainly, you're going to be very familiar with the auto industry. I have a hypothesis that what you're thinking about in that difficult industry are things that people better start thinking about in other industries pretty quick. So don't be concerned if it's the non-automotive audience here. I think they're going to learn a lot. So once you get started here, kind of what do you see are those top three things we should really look at, and what should we look for and why?
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I agree with you. Most of the things that we deal with in the auto industry, and there's a lot of challenges, as you know, and a lot of our listeners know, can be applied to other industries. So for us at Aludyne, we're focused on several things, but three of the top things right now are digital transformation. And we're constantly asking ourselves some really key critical questions is, what can we digitize within our business to become more efficient? Are we wasting time doing a lot of manual operations that we could and should digitize? Learning to ask the right questions. So what is the most important KPI to our success? And what actions are we taking as a company to meet our KPIs? The second topic that we're really focused on is, as you mentioned earlier, the forever labor shortage. This has been around for a long time. Definitely was really highlighted as critical during COVID when we couldn't find people to come in and run our operations. So some of the key questions we're asking ourselves with the forever labor shortage is, do we have the most efficient organizational structure to allow us to accomplish our KPIs? Do we have the right people in our organization? Because it's not just getting people, it's getting the right people. Do we have the right people in the right positions to allow that structure, to allow all team members to perform at their highest possible level? And then the third critical topic, as you mentioned earlier, is we're all challenged with doing more with less. So some of the questions we're asking ourselves in those areas are, what are the areas of our business that are not running as efficiently as it should? And where can we digitize to improve our overall company efficiency?
That's awesome. So let's take a deeper dive now into some specificity, if you will, and a little more granularity. And when you talk about digital transformation, I'd be very interested in understanding the scope of that in your mind, right? Are we just looking at the factory floor, which I think is a big mistake? Are we looking at everything, starting with the whole up front, product development cycle out through supply? I mean, share with us, kind of what are some of the areas you're looking at when it comes to digitizing of work and digitization, digital transformation? Give us a few specific examples we can relate to that.
Yeah, sure. So,
and why are you looking at those things?
Yeah, great questions. So we're really looking at areas where we have either repetitive tasks that can be automated or tasks or initiatives. I'll give you a very specific example, and I think a lot of our listeners may be able to relate to this. Anytime you have a large global billion-dollar organization, north of billion-dollar organization like an Aludyne, there's typically multiple ERPs, and that's for a lot of different reasons, either built by acquisition, any number of reasons. So pulling global spend reports is extremely difficult because you're pulling reports from multiple ERPs, and then we've all heard this term, the mashing of the spreadsheets. So all of our listeners will be familiar and not surprised how many global billion-plus-dollar organizations run on spreadsheets. So we are really trying to digitize as much as we can, including spend reports for efficiency. It takes a lot of time to mash those spreadsheets. And if we can digitize that, pull that into one format, it saves a lot of people hours. And quite honestly, it saves a lot of time that otherwise would be inefficient. And we can use that additional time toward being more strategic, building stronger partnerships with our suppliers.
Yeah, so I'm going to interrupt for just a second here. So Alan mentioned ERP, so he means enterprise resource planning systems, in case you're not familiar with the jargon, but then layered into that with ERP system. And I know Alan knows this, but there's this process called sales inventory and operations planning. And having run that shop myself as in a Tier-1 auto supplier in my history, I'm familiar with how crucial that is in an industry like the automotive industry, where you've got customers with absolutely uncompromising demand, meaning not shipping on time isn't one of the options. On time, in full, at quality, that's just not one of the options. I actually was chartering DC-9s to ship body panels, inside interior panels for United Technologies Automotive for a plant I worked at years ago. And that was not a fun experience to explain to corporate what was going on. So what you're talking about here is, today, the SIOP, sales inventory and operations planning, is unfortunately very spreadsheet laden. And so that's probably one of the things you're thinking in your head about, how do we largely automate all those inputs?
Absolutely. As you know, Ron, the situation you just described is a very expensive situation, one that is not in the budget because nobody ever wants to budget for premium freight, because when we're using premium and air freight, something went wrong on the front end or the process. So for us, we're looking at additional tools, whether it's robotic process automation with repetitive tasks, and anything that we can do to prevent the situation that you just mentioned as far as utilizing air freight, because again, nobody has air freight or premium freight in their budget when they bid on and win a program.
Cool. Very cool. So let's give me an example of robotic process automation at work in your mind so that we can wrap our head around what do we mean by robotic process automation? Give me an example of how that might work.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of many digitization techniques that if you've got a repetitive task and instead of a human being, me, you, or any of our listeners, punching keystrokes into a computer or into a keyboard, there's a program that can be written working closely with our IT department that says, okay, these are the steps you take, but they're very repetitive. Right now, you're having a human person spend 8 hours a day inputting data. We can write a program so that somebody gets one keystroke and then the entire process from start to finish is completed without any additional human intervention.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that includes accessing multiple systems and performing multiple connections and conditional decision making, right, as it goes through that, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So that's what's different. And when I was a kid, a long time ago, we actually had a programmable key on our keyboard and we could record 3, 5, 6, 7 different keystrokes for navigating through screens. So we were doing our PSYOP activities. You kind of get to a point, hit a button, it would do 5 or 6 things to at least, save you from clicking through it. And well, back in the day, but today, robotic process automation is way more complex and it's truly connecting multiple systems and inputs and taking the human out of having to make a lot of decisions.
Absolutely. So we're here at Aludyne, the procurement and supply chain teams that I lead globally work very closely with our IT team. We've got a great IT team here at Aludyne helping us with that because while we are the subject matter experts in procurement and supply chain, we're not the subject matter experts when it comes to some of the more IT focused areas. So really driving that cross-functional collaboration is one of the many factors that helps us be successful.
Okay. All right, cool. Anything else around digital transformation you might offer up as something to look at critically? And then maybe another element there is, what are you looking for? What kind of data, information, what evidence are you looking for that there's something we could do?
Yeah. So I'll give you a good example. Very recently here at Aludyne, we took on a very big project on our indirect spend. Indirect spend sometimes gets overlooked because it's not shipped to the end customer, but we spend almost as much on indirect MRO or capital equipment, tooling, as we do on metal components and other direct materials. And when I arrived here in 2020, we weren't managing it. It was being managed well at the site level, but at the site level, there were not a lot of synergies being driven from site to site. So when I got here, I worked very closely with the CEO and the CFO, and we agreed that we needed to manage that more effectively at a corporate level. Now, to do that, we needed to have real-time data. So with our recent launch of our procure-to-pay system, we're obtaining that information in real time from all of our sites that we previously were not able to obtain in real time because things were stored in multiple ERPs. So it's something that I would say it's our biggest digital transformation in the last 4 years that I've been with Aludyne.
All right, cool. Anything else around digital transformation and digitization we should be looking at before we pivot to the next thing?
I don't think so at this time, other than the fact that I'll leave the listeners with this. Always be looking what you can digitize.
Exactly. All right, cool. So what's the next diagnostic you want to get into?
I'd like to jump into the forever labor shortage.
Yeah, near and dear to my heart.
I think near and dear to all of our hearts, because as leaders, we always go into a budget season and say, I want 10 more people. And then we get laughed at and say, you're not getting 10 more people. By the way, we're going to grow 20% and you're going to do it with the same workforce you have currently. So when we talk about the forever labor shortage, we look at, really deep diving the responsibilities of the team members that we have. Are we doing things that make sense? I always ask people, if we don't do that, what happens? Does the company stop operating? And where can we focus our very valuable time on the most valuable items, the most valuable KPIs to help our company be successful?
Cool. Very cool. Do you have an example, maybe? Something you might have picked apart like that comes to mind?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to really the people development, meaning that if we're going to be leaders specifically in this industry, but really at any company, at any industry, is we've got to lead our people and develop our people, because nobody is born a leader or born a great engaging leader. So really trying to touch all areas of the business and engaging with all of the leaders on the team. And I refer to every team member as a leader, whether they are a leader by title with direct reports or just an individual contributor. They're leading a lot of key projects. So really making sure that we're expanding scopes as appropriately. We don't want to completely overload and overwhelm people, but we do always want to challenge all of our team members, all of our leaders, so that they're always taking on more and always growing.
You guys have a formal mentorship program? I mean, we had a recent podcast with Alan Shevela, is talking about this knowledge gap, right? And hypothesis that, traditionally we created the baby boomers, right? The gray hairs on the workforce really kind of make all the decisions. And we're not carefully giving people coming up through the ranks an opportunity to have significant responsibility, which implies some kind of mentorship program. Is that a part of your strategy?
It is. So we have professional development plans for every team member.
Oh, okay.
I'm a firm believer that you're not truly a leader until you've led a leader that's developed another leader, meaning take it more than one step, take it a second layer down, a third layer down. So it's something that is near and dear to my heart. I believe that any successful organization has to have great leaders across the board. So while we previously talked about digitization and automation, those things are all vitally important to the future success of any company, but you can't execute those unless you have great leaders. So for me, it all comes back to the development of every team member and developing every team member to be a great leader.
I like what you did there, Alan, around a leader isn't just somebody who manages people, influences people. A leader has responsibility and ownership of accomplishing something that's important for the business. So even though they might be an individual contributor. So that was a really good one. And a great thing I like about that is, everybody thinks of themselves as a leader. And from a culture perspective, I think that's a real good thing.
Well, it's one thing that I try to tell people. I get offended when they say, "Hey, boss." I say, "Well, I'm not your boss, but we're colleagues. We're teammates. We work on this together. Yes, I'm at or near the top of an org chart. Throw that out the window. We're on this team together, driving toward the same goals. And I'm humble enough to admit that I can't be successful unless every single person, the team that reports up through me on an org chart, is successful. So my success is 100% dependent on the success of everybody else on the org chart."
Wow, that's amazing stuff. And, right spot on with kind of some of the things I believe. You talk about having, the right structure, and I find that pretty interesting. We haven't talked about that yet. Could you share a bit more about when you talk about structure, what are you thinking? And you need to define this pretty carefully, because this may be a bit foreign to folks around the structure of the organization and how it actually impacts the productivity and the effectiveness.
Sure. So the way we're structured here, and it's a structure that I've been very successful at a previous company, is there are so many critical links within procurement and supply chain. At a very high level, people are typically pretty familiar with direct material. It's everything that we buy, whether in our case at Aludyne, raw materials, a lot of aluminum, magnesium, scrap metal, components. People are typically familiar with that, but we buy so much of it. And the partnerships we drive with our supply base is so critically important. I don't want that to get lost at any other link in the supply chain. So I've got very strong leaders at every link in the supply chain. So I've got a great leader that leads our direct materials so here at Aludyne. I've got a great leader that leads our indirect materials. So indirect, again, anything that doesn't go to the customer, something as critical as personal protective equipment. So safety glasses at our plants, gloves, all PPE. I've got a great leader that leads our capital equipment and tooling. So all of our very large, very expensive casting machines, all of our very large, very expensive CNC machining centers and so forth. I've got a great leader that leads our supplier development. And that's a really critical role because, again, we only want to work with the world-class supply base into us. So making sure that we not only identify, but also develop, not just at the early stages, but throughout our partnership, all of our supply base. So again, for me, the org structure is vitally important. I've seen some very flat org structures where there's one person in my role and then everybody reports directly to that role. And it's very, very challenging if you don't have top-level leaderships at each function of the supply chain.
All right, so let's dig into that because I asked you about structure. and you didn't answer it directly. You answered it indirectly. I want to make sure I kind of got the gist of where you were headed. Is, rather than a very hierarchical decision-making structure, right, where decisions are made and going up and down a structure, you're more a proponent of making the organization as flat as possible, but only accomplishing that through highly competent and capable individuals in those key chairs, so that we don't depend on a hierarchical structure to make important decisions. We can make those at the point of attack, right, where it needs to happen.
Absolutely.
But so I like that a lot. But then, as a practical matter, what happens if Billy Bob is suddenly out sick? That's part of the structure too, right?
Absolutely. So that's one of the great challenges with any very lean organization, which I believe every organization is pretty lean nowadays, including Aludyne. So you're right. When you operate in a very lean structure, we are very highly dependent on the specialization of each leader. So if my top leader in indirect is out sick or goes on a week-long vacation, that's where I have to step in and be the leader for each one of the functions. Because my leader of capital equipment is really, really good at capital equipment, but they probably aren't nearly as good as my leader in direct materials or direct materials.
Well, you're a proponent of cross-training programs, stuff like that?
Yes. I smile because I feel like you might have my office here in Southfield booked, because I just had one of those conversations earlier today on one of our development plans for one of our key leaders, and thinking about shifting somebody from either direct into indirect or indirect into capital equipment. So I'm a huge, huge proponent of cross-training philosophies. That way that they're never going to be, most folks kind of gravitate toward one thing over others, but it's really, really good to get exposures in many, many different fields. That way, when the opportunity arises for upward mobility or to expand your scope, you're ready for it.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. I mean, many years ago, I was materials manager for a Tier-1 auto supplier at a plant in Battle Creek, Michigan area. And I had an individual who ran our warehouse operation, was John, and another individual, Kathy, who ran the back end for all the shipping, the inbound, receiving and the shipping. And as you know, a Tier-1 auto supplier, shipping flawlessly determines whether you're still in business or not, if you like premium freight. But they would snipe at each other a little bit, right? And then when it's time for a vacation, it's a bit of a struggle. And so one day I said, you know what? You guys are going to switch jobs for 3 weeks. So you've got 2 weeks to get ready. And then you're going to physically go and do that other person's job for 3 weeks. And then I'll be here to support both of you. And they didn't like it. It's not even a little bit. But 2 things happened at the back of that were good. Is the sniping went down quite a bit because they didn't really understand the challenges and the headaches the other person faced, in the day-to-day operations. And the other big benefit, which made me sleep a lot better at night as a leader myself, is, if Kathy couldn't be there, John could step back there and make sure those ASMs went out correctly. If I couldn't be there myself, so it gave me a chance to be a little less 24/7 on call.
Yes. No, you're right. And the other reality is that in organizations, it's unfortunately very odd for somebody to work at one company for 35, 40 years and then retire. So there not only is there that forever labor shortage, there unfortunately the auto industry, because a lot of the jobs are very high stress, very chaotic, and it's not uncommon for people to decide to make a change after 1 or 2 or 3 years. So one of the things I always focus on, going back to the people development, is that really talented, really high value performing team members and leaders have a choice of where they want to work. So that's why I always list the people development as one of my top focus areas, because I want people to want to work here on my team at Aludyne, and I don't want them to pick up that phone call and choose to leave. So one of the main things that I can offer any team member, whether they're on my direct team or in other functional areas, various developmental opportunities.
Okay, cool. All right. Anything else around this forever labor shortage challenge before we move on to the next thing?
No, I mean, I think unfortunately for people like me, you, and all of our listeners, we're always going to deal with it. So we always have to think of creative ways to deal with it the best we possibly can.
All right, cool. Any other diagnostic you want to get into around this doing more with less?
For me, doing more with less, it really is it's connected to the first two that we've talked about already, and that is, how can we become more efficient? So we're never going to have less tasks or less initiatives to take on. There's always going to be more of that, and the initiatives will always outpace the number of people we're able to add to our team. So we have to think of creative solutions on being more efficient. And sometimes that means stop doing certain things that we've been doing. One example that pops into my mind right now is certain reports that are run. So as you can relate to, and in some of your past experiences, I get a ton of emails with a lot of reports on them. And I know some of the people that send me these reports probably don't want to hear this. I don't have time to look at them all. So is somebody looking at these reports, or are we doing them just because years ago we were told this is a good thing to track? So when we talk about KPIs, we have to make sure they're the right KPIs and that we're actually measuring the things we want to measure and making improvements to those KPIs. So the key to doing more with less is always ask questions. Why are we doing this? Can we be doing it better? What actions can we take to be doing this better?
And can it be digitized somehow?
And can it be digitized somehow?
And they go hand in hand, right? Process.
Yes.
It's because you think about, value stream mapping, and, over the years, I was forced to really figure out how to get the people, process, and the technology to visibly appear in a meaningful, measurable way. And so, if they're talking about these manual processes, so how often does that happen? And why are we doing that? And really, so help me understand more about that. And then that kind of leads to, so which IT systems are you using and why are we using that? Okay. Which ones do you use all the time? Which ones do you use sometimes? What drives that? And then leads to, a way to measure it, put a yardstick on it and say, okay, the 20 different systems in play, which 10 or which 5 generate the most transactional headaches? And maybe that's where we start.
Absolutely. I'm like you, Ron. I'm a big fan of value stream mapping because I know that everybody is chaotically busy and very stressed out, but I always tell people we can't be so busy that we don't have time to improve. It's like somebody in procurement saying, Mr. CO, I'm too busy to save money. No, yes, you have to work on all the minute-to-minute, hour fires, but you also have to pull yourself away from the fires a little bit each day to be strategic and to work on those efficiency gains and those digitization initiatives.
All right. Well, that kind of pivots us very naturally into the practical advice. And in this particular case, you've given us a lot of gems around what to do and why to do it kind of together, right, as we went. But I would like to come back and just talk about, let's just pretend the audience listened to this and they said, we really have those challenges, right? The digital transformation and getting there is a real problem for us. We're going to continue to have labor shortages and we're going to continue to have pressure. And these are the sorts of things we should go do. Maybe you can give it a bit more around how to go and actually implement, right? The practical how do you go and harvest those gains in those 3 areas?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the digital transformation. It's an area we touched a little bit on. Can we utilize robotic process automation? And one of the things to start with is, you mentioned earlier, okay, let's Pareto all of our challenges. And there's a lot of challenges, but what are the ones that are most painful? And start with the ones that are most painful or the most time consuming, taking very valuable time away from team members and team leaders, being strategic. And working closely cross-functionally with our IT leaders, what can be digitized or automated or utilized tools like robotic process automation. I would say for us, we have to look at all of the activities, all of the initiatives that we're involved in and say, is this sustainable? What I mean by that is, are we going to burn people out by saying, okay, we've got to do manually 20 hours worth of work a day, but we've got to somehow cram that down to something less than that because nobody wants to work 20 hours a day. And then we've got to look at, our overall input cost and make sure that we're all very, very clear of the value of each activity, each initiative that we're doing. And then again, I always circle back to, how can we do this better?
Yeah, so the sustainability one really kind of caught my imagination here, making it sustainable. So your perspective is, I was trying to hear all the elements of sustainability, right? So sustainability meaning people are actually capable of doing it. We can give them the room to do things and continue to give them the space, right, to do the things they need to be able to do. What else will go to sustainability? I'm guessing, from a business model perspective, is it going to continue as it is, or is it something that's going to change a lot, which makes it not sustainable? I was just curious if there are any other elements around sustainability that really caught my interest.
Yeah, for me, it's not only what are we working on today. Obviously, as with any growth business, we're always aggressively out there pursuing to grow. So it's not just managing the challenges of today. It's constantly taking on additional challenges, supporting our sales and commercial team with very good, detailed, accurate quotes to make sure that when we quote a customer on a project, that we're actually not losing money on it. And a lot of that comes back to the procurement and supply chain folks that control all of the input cost. So making sure that, again, working very closely cross-functionally with all of our teams, in this case, from a sustainability perspective, specifically with our sales and commercial team, because if our folks are already very, very busy working a lot of hours, more than they care to admit, the last thing they want to do is work additional hours trying to grow additional business. But it is something that has to be done. So what tools do we provide to them to make sure that they're not just exchanging emails, exchanging Excel spreadsheets, and being as efficient as they can, whether it's a more robust quoting process or an overall more robust costing process?
Which gets at, that 100% cost clarity thing you mentioned in your notes here. I'm cheating because I get to look ahead and, all that clarity, but that's just a lot of transparency is required, but at least internally.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because I always I live by a lot of philosophies. One of them is be transparent. Even if the news is bad news, if it's news I don't want to hear, at least I'm aware of it. At least I have that clarity. Because a lot of people, historically, there's been this almost wall between procurement and sales, because sales will say, hey, whatever procurement saves from the supply base, I can give back to the customer. And procurement's view on that is, no, I want to help the company reach all of our KPIs, all of our financial targets. And if you give everything away that I saved, then we're no further ahead. So, but I think there has to be that level of transparency between all functions, in this specific case, between procurement and sales, to say, here's what the market rate is. We've got a really strong procurement team here at Aludyne. We think we can get it for market minus X. So if the quoted price is the market price to a customer, we should be to help the company as a whole reach our financial goals.
Cool. How about the second area that we talked about, this whole thing around that forever labor shortage and being more effective with our people?
Yeah, I think that, making sure that our people are the most effective that they possibly can be. It takes a lot of time and effort, but one of my personal approaches is spend time with people. Spend as much time as you can with people. It doesn't always have to be scheduled one-on-ones every week. It can be impromptu 5 to 10 minute meetings. If a meeting gets out early, one of the things I love to do is take a walk around the floor and just go up to somebody, ask them, how's Project Titan going? How are these things? What are the roadblocks? Are there things I can be doing to better support you, to help you be successful? And really making sure people know that they're cared about, that they're an important part of the organization, and that the future success of this organization depends on their success. And really making sure that we have a true one Aludyne approach.
Very cool. Anything else around the people side you want to touch on before we move into the next area?
I always like to leave you with one comment. And again, people are always the most important part of any successful organization. We can have all the latest and greatest tools, all the best digitization and automation, but we need great people helping lead all of those initiatives.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I can't remember where I picked this up many years ago, is this notion that people are the ultimate differentiator, because your competitors can invest in the best technology. They can hire the best engineers for product development. They can source in the best way and all these other things. So that's the one thing they can't have that you have. And probably the only ultimate differentiator is the organization's people. I've always been a strong proponent of that myself. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Anything else before we get into wrap up?
No, I don't think so. Again, I always love talking about these critical topics. Obviously, the people development, the people leadership, and then various ways of becoming more efficient. Again, with digitization and always doing more with less.
All right. Well, this has been great. And I don't care what industry you're involved with, even if you're not in manufacturing, there's some real gems here around competitive advantage and, understanding where do you apply, digitization of work and things like that. And kind of what's the thinking behind that helps you be successful. And I do resonate with this notion that, people are the ultimate differentiator in organizations. And I was telling my team today, we have a global all hands meeting every month. We have a team that's all over the world. And, we have this little, core values thing. We talk about it each time we get together as a team. And I kind of asked the team, if you're going to describe our culture, is it congruent? with, the values that we have as an organization. Just trying to understand that. And definitely, this notion that customer experiences from an organization, the people, the customer experience they have with your employees is dictated directly by how you treat your employees.
100% agree with you, Ron. It's one of the reasons I've got the Helidine values on the wall behind me, and I truly believe in them. And I'll leave the listeners with this. This was taught to me by a mentor many, many years ago. No matter what the situation is, there's only a few things in our lives that we control. It's our attitude, our effort, and how we treat people. And try to walk by somebody that's having a bad day, walk by them with your hand up like you're giving them a high five. And 10 times out of 10, they will look at you in the eye, smile, and put their hand up and give you that high five, and you'll have that positive transformation of energy.
Awesome stuff. So, Alan, if folks were intrigued with what you have to say, they wanted to, talk with you more about these topics, I'd like to get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Anybody is invited to send me an email. You can reach me at alan.shevela@aludyne.com. That's ALAN.
And you are a brave man for sharing that. Thank you.
I live my life by many models. One of them is try to have a positive impact on everybody that you come in contact with.
Alan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Ron. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.